Welcome to the fourth and final segment for Jim and I of this week. We, of course, cover stacks in the final video of the week. But before we get to which stacks are worth using this week in tournaments, we, of course, offering a free trial for NFL. This is everything that's included in a premium membership, which includes position rankings, projections, cheat sheets, must-have tools like DVP rankings, points per attempt, red zone utilization, optimized lineups for both DraftKings and FanDuel, access to player ownership percentage, pretty much everything you need to succeed in DFS. So while I pull up this image, Jim, what better than a RotoCurve subscription? Because we got to kill time for a second. Tell me about why it's necessary.
Well, I mean, the reason it's necessary, we went through this in the last pod, is that like I said, it helps reduce the noise, right? Because there's a lot of noise in fantasy football and in fantasy sports in general. I mean, look, we find new updates all the time. We find new reasons to take different paths. And I think what this does is our cheat sheets particularly help refine and score kind of what the best matchups are, especially because we're driven by recency bias. And you might not think that, hey, Kelvin Benjamin, for example, is a guy that we should really consider this week. That seems obvious because they're playing the Saints. And it might seem obvious because he has a good touchdown rate. But he's also disappointed people so much the last several weeks that it's easy to let him to ignore him. So he's he's seventh on the list right now for receivers. So that's going to make you really consider him and remind you of why he's valuable. So if you're ready, go for it.
Way to save my ass there as I accidentally closed out of the image. RotoCurve NFL Week 6 free trial. Everything I just mentioned, rotocurve.com/NFL-trial. I've had it up on the screen for a few, so you could write it down, put it in your notes on your iPhone, whatever you got to do. Jim, let's talk about the stacks this week. We've already been over the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, the running backs. So how are we going to put it all together to win some tournaments?
Well, I mean, I'm going to take a receiver that you really like and a quarterback that I really like because they tend to work together, those two things. I like Alex Smith and Jeremy Maclin. I think, there's a healthy point spread in this game. It's going to be a close spread. And here's the thing. The Raiders, like I said, they're the Saints in the sense that they allow a ton of points. The difference is they win their games. The Saints lose their games. But really, it's a shootout-type team. We even saw those two teams play each other in a shootout. Derek Carr is doing everything in the fourth quarter. That's how they're winning, which is to say I wouldn't worry about their record. It's not imposing. This is a great setup for Smith. They're allowing the second most yards per attempt. Only the Jets are allowing more. They don't have a good pressure rating. I mean, Khalil Mack gives you this impression, right, that they have this great sack artist. He only has, one sack? Or he's doing really well in pressures, but it's just not a really dangerous team to play. Defensively, the idea was, you and I talked in August, and the idea in theory was, you were all over Carr. You had it right. But the theory was that the Raiders are going to run the ball and dominate on defense. They've done neither of those things, all right? So they're a shootout-type team. I think shares of Smith and Maclin are super affordable. If you stack those two guys, you can then go get those crazy running backs we talked about, the Lev Bells, the DeMarco Murrays, the LaShawn McCoys, Lamar Millers, and you can get the high-cost certainty guys. The other stack that I really like is Cam Newton and Greg Olsen. Olsen is basically producing at a wide receiver 1 rate. He's doing what Jimmy Graham used to do. He's doing Gronk-type stuff in terms of this guy's only a few yards behind the league lead. And none of it, last week was huge, but he's doing it every week. And he gets red zone targets over and over. He could have had even a bigger week last week. There's a lot left on the table there because Derek Anderson's Derek Anderson. So the setup's amazing. Kenny Vaccaro is a good hitter. He's not great in coverage. Jairus Byrd is one of the worst free agent signings of the last decade. They're just not good in coverage. I'm not worried about anything that the Saints are going to do. The other thing is, too, there's no way for Olsen to be expensive enough in terms of relative to receivers, right? Because he's still priced at a reasonable rate compared to he's a mid-level receiver at some point, right? In terms of what he's being charged. Like, he's $7,000. That's what it costs to get – I'm looking at a guy. That's what it costs to get Alshon Jeffrey or Michael Crabtree right now. So you're getting an elite guy who I think is going to have 85, 100 yards and a touchdown, and you're not paying that wide receiver 1 rate. So that's the stack that I like the most is Cam Newton, Greg Olsen.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with one that I kind of mentioned earlier. I like this whole Bills team. They're 9-point favorites. And I think the way they're going to get it done against San Francisco is mostly via the run, which of course comes from Tyrod Taylor, who'll probably be scrambling, and it comes from LaShawn McCoy. They'll probably run some option type plays where both or either or both can get involved. And I have no fear going both Tyrod and McCoy and maybe even the Bills
I
defense.
was going to say, yeah, why not get the defense in there for complementary scoring?
Exactly. If you think they're going to pound this game, and I definitely do. I mean, Colin Kaepernick, I was just looking. I wrote an article in 2014 about how Kaepernick cannot throw to the left side of the field. He was completing, this is in 2014, either 50% or less of his passes, pretty much to all levels of the field on the left side, and then 65 and above on the right side, which is just ridiculous. So he clearly has a big flaw. If Rob Ryan has a clue at all, they'll scheme him that way. And, this Bills team should get it done. So Tyrod's so cheap where he doesn't need that much. If he completes a pass to McCoy, like, has happened before, and they score, you get both of them, you get it correlated. So I love that one. Another one I like is a quarterback that I liked and a receiver that you like. So I'm reciprocating here. How about Matthew Stafford and Marvin Jones
Yeah,
for tournaments? Because the Rams defense is solid, but Stafford's just a yardage beast. I mean, if Riddick's going to be out, if basically they're going to be relying on, I don't even know who this weekend. I guess it's going to be Forsett and Zenner.
yeah.
If Riddick ends up being out, it's going to have to be all Stafford for them to win at home. I love the fact that they're in the dome. So I'm willing to roll with him there, who's always kind of a sneaky option in tournaments. And then Russell Wilson to Jimmy Graham. I mentioned Russell Wilson in the quarterbacks, but Graham's the guy that I really like. This Falcons defense, ultra susceptible to the tight ends. They've allowed the third most fantasy points, 340 yards and 5 touchdowns already. So I think if you're going to pair Wilson with anyone, you could go with Baldwin. I know you like him, but I think Graham's the guy that I like. Kind of a mid-tier tight end option. But besides that, then you go Cam Newton with Olsen. I'm with you there. If you're going to go Tom Brady, pick a guy. I think a lot of them are in good spots this week. I think you could go Gronkowski, even though his matchup on paper isn't the greatest. The two of them tend to find a way to score each week. You could go Edelman or you could go James White. But besides that, then I think you start going with a bunch of one-offs. I don't like Roethlisberger. I think Prescott to Cole Beasley was obviously one that I liked. But besides that, it's a whole lot of just mixing and matching this week. There's really not a whole bunch of, monster stacks that I think I'm in on other than Buffalo, who really, aren't an offense that you typically think of to get it done.
I'm gonna have at least one Bortles and Robinson stack, just based on the idea that that's how that team will ever compete, is putting the ball up. And they're, again, this idea, the Raiders kind of concept. We thought we were sold this idea, and we all buy it. We do. The idea that the Jags are going to be different this year, and really they're the same exact template they've always been, which is they get behind and they get sloppy, and then they have to catch up. And I think that's what could happen. And if it's one of these things where if Robinson is my favorite tournament receiver, then I almost have to, in some senses, consider Bortles interesting too, because if he can put up 2 touchdowns, that's a great combination. So I tend to agree with you though here with these setups, and I think the sneaky stack might even be going all 3 there with Graham, Baldwin, and Wilson. If you really do believe, that this Falcons defense is also just due to get beat up.
Yeah, and I was talking main slate there. If we're expanding it, then I think Carson Palmer to John Brown and Larry Fitzgerald has to be included, and that might actually be number 1. If you're going to play the Thursday slate, if you're going to play the Sunday slate on Fantasy Draft, I don't even know which other sites include Monday. But if you're going to include that Monday game, Carson Palmer's got to be involved there. I really, really, really love the spot for that whole passing game. I think you could go him and even both receivers. I think there's, enough upside to be had in this matchup where I'm not in love with David Johnson like I usually am most weeks, so I think Palmer could get it done. But I did want to throw that in there because I know it's not included in DraftKings main slate, but is still of note.
I agree. Yeah, I wish it was, because this is the game. This is the bounce back game for Palmer.
Yeah, coming off that head injury, he seems to be fine. They even say maybe last week if the game was Sunday, he would have played. So he's over that. This is a great matchup. Probably no Revis, so you got to like it there. And they are 7.5 point favorites with most of the public money on them so far. So you got to like that. Before we go, just want to tell you about, of course, that NFL trial. Once again, we got to reiterate that it's such a, it's free. So it's an amazing deal. You get all that's involved in a weekly membership. What's included: the exclusive rankings, projections, cheat sheets, tools like DVP rankings, points per attempt, red zone, optimized lineups, access to player ownership percentage after the Thursday night kickoff, which is obviously to your benefit. You get to see the ownership percentage of guys like AJ Green and other guys we've talked about that we weren't particularly sure of what it's going to be. So that would be an advantage to you. Thanks for everything. Good luck this week. Jim, let's come back here next week with $1 million in our pocket. We've given some ideas. Neither of us have hit that million yet, but I think it's coming.
And the crazy thing is, I would still do fantasy stuff. What else am I going to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
People talk about quitting their jobs if they win $1 million. I would just keep doing this.
Yeah, I think I would keep doing this, and then once every month I'd say, I think I'm going to take the next week off. I'm going to the Caribbean. I'm going to Hong Kong this week.
Better lighting,
Exactly, but I think I'd be doing this as well. Good luck to everyone this week. We will be back next week.